Hello, my name is Dr. Amoneeta. I am the University Counseling Center Director of Webster University, Thailand. Webster University is a global network of university system. We have campuses on 4 continents, many in America, in Europe, in Uzbekistan, in Africa, and then we have 2 campuses over here in Thailand. One in the rural area of Cham, which is where I'm mostly based, and then one in downtown Bangkok, which I go to visit once a week. So I'm in charge of all the counseling center details of these 2 campuses, which means that I conduct therapy, group therapy, individual therapy, and basically any kind of mental health needs for the students, faculty, and staff at both campuses. I also have an intern training program where I train interns to see students, faculty, and staff at the Bangkok campus, and when I go there I do training and supervision with them. So besides general therapy, I'm also in charge of things like making sure that the students know about the mental health services. So I meet with them during orientation, and I speak during those new student orientations, and I try to meet all the new students then. I also do mental health psychoeducational workshops with all new students as in their first semester to train them on things like psychological first aid, culture shock, adjustment to the university, and bystander effect and bystander intervention training. So those are some of the things I do, beside also being on staff, on faculty as a psychology professor, meaning I teach a class or 2 a semester, and I do service projects, and I also do some research. Beside teaching, I do some research and attend conferences and speaking, etc. So in sum, that's kind of what I do. In my role as the Counseling Center Director, I also designed an emergency crisis response where I train and work with student resident assistants to be first responders, and then if there is any kind of homicidal or more commonly suicidal situation, then students are able to call the RAs, and then the RAs will call me, and we will deal with those kind of crises in that time. So that's kind of a thing that's available 24 hours a day. So I was asked to speak on the topic of student support services, best practices during the pandemic. So beside kind of what I was doing prior to the pandemic, I kind of continue to do those types of things, but obviously with quite a bit of adjustments and changes. When we went to study from home, work from home, this required quite a bit of adjustment. Prior to the pandemic, I was able to sit in my office, make appointments, and also have plenty of time for drop-in. So a lot of the students knew that they could kind of drop in anytime if I wasn't busy doing other appointments, that they could drop in. Well, that was no longer the case, that I was no longer available since nobody was coming to campus anymore. So one of the things that I did to adjust for the drop-in was I held online drop-in hours on Zoom. So this was just a general open hours that I announced to the whole university that if anybody wanted to, they could drop in, which meant that I would be maybe doing other work on the computer and have the Zoom open in the background, and if somebody dropped into that open hours, then we could chat, and then we could kind of make future appointments like that. Less ideal than sitting in the office and having them come by. Online therapy is also less ideal, right? You only see like here, right, from the kind of the chest up. You don't see the full body language. You don't have the same opportunity to make as good of a therapeutic bond and understanding with your clients. However, it's certainly better than nothing, and there is a good research that supports that online therapy can be effective. And for some, it may be even better because of the fact that they may be more comfortable coming into therapy because they may not be, in person. They might be seen by others walking into the office, and so making an online appointment, they won't have that same risk of stigma. And of course, there's some convenience of being able to do it from their home. So the transition online was challenging because not everybody knew how to use the technology. I was somewhat concerned about kind of confidentiality and security. What I did primarily was through Google Hangouts, since our university operates on a Gmail type of system, that all the students at least had a Gmail account for their university official account, so we could communicate directly through the official channels. However, these types of things like Zoom and Hangouts, etc., they're not necessarily fully secure. They're not necessarily fully encrypted and those types of things. So there's some risk to clients' confidentiality using these types of systems. Unfortunately, we didn't really have the funds to purchase equipped type of software that would ensure confidentiality and encrypt it and be much more secure. So we had to make do with what we had. Since then, I did find a nice app that actually works and is free, and that is designed for counselors and is very much encrypted. That's called Doxy. So that Doxy, D-O-X-Y, was quite helpful, and because again it was free and it's something that we could transition to using. Another thing that was required to transition would be online forms, especially for new clients, since returning clients, they already had the forms and information on file. Previous to that, to try to ensure confidentiality, I tried not to do anything that contained client confidential information on the computer. I tried to have only hard copies of forms. But the pandemic kind of forced me to do electronic forms, and so I made some electronic online documents in order for them to fill out, like general intake information and those things, to facilitate and make it easier for clients to get me the basic information. Another challenge, of course, was the crisis response. So most of our students are international students, and a good number of them decided to go ahead and go back to their countries when the pandemic hit because they didn't know what would be in store for the future. And then after that, new students we would enroll online only, and they never even set foot in Thailand, that they were still back home in their countries. So that meant that I was dealing with crises sometimes in many different countries with people scattered around the world, and sometimes they may be suicidal, and it wouldn't be the same as being able to kind of go out to the dormitory or meet them in a hospital setting or something like that, and diagnose and work with them to ensure their safety. It would only be kind of online, and of course online is not the best situation for crisis, but we would do the best we could. And then I had to make myself familiar with the crisis services and the crisis hotlines in the different countries that my clients were in. Sometimes even on the phone with them, kind of Googling what the crisis hotline numbers are. So another thing was that, of course, there were many different concerns for students about the pandemic, but not every time they came in to talk with me was it about the pandemic. many of them just continued for normal mental health needs, kind of the same things that they were seeing prior to the pandemic, the general things that students come to counseling for. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on, of course, it would be very important for counselors and other mental health professionals to maintain their own mental health and their own kind of self-care needs, and be aware of things like screen fatigue and compassion fatigue, that these things have gotten worse during the pandemic, and the huge need for services. It's easy to kind of go above and beyond and to burn yourself out, and that's risky because there aren't enough qualified mental health professionals in the world, and then if we burn out, that can be quite problematic. And so it becomes important to kind of be able to take care of themselves, protect their own boundaries, kind of protect their office hours, right? It's very easy to say, let me be flexible and work on the weekend and have an appointment because that's convenient for you and convenient for me, possibly, or after hours in the evening. But it's also important to take breaks. Now, that's not to say during crises I'm always available 24/7, but other than that, it's important to be able to protect one's time and boundaries and those types of things. So I'll wrap up there. Thank you very much for your time and interest.